Well, thank you to the IOC for having us here. Britt and I are longtime practitioners and very much focused on organizational culture in our own way, so I hope we can tell you some stories you'll enjoy today. I think what we've done is we've broken down culture into things that we think are the most impactful, what make people feel good about coming to work every day. And it's actually the small things that are really most important. So we thought we'd pick some of those and spend the next several segments talking about them. The first one is really about mission, vision, and values, what some people would consider the soft stuff in an organization. Britt, talk a little bit about why that's actually very important.
Well, I think the literature is pretty profound on this topic. So when you look at academic research, it's pretty significant. But for a practitioner, the fundamental question one might ask themselves is, what am I doing here? You know, what's my purpose? What's my meaning? And where is this organization going? And where am I going? And what are the guide rails, the rules, the values along the way? When you start asking those profound questions, start emerging a conversation about the organization. So why am I here? Why was this organization created? What's the mission, right? And then the vision is where we're going to be. What do we hope to achieve? What will we become? And many organizations have a difficult time articulating that. And what you'll see is mission creep, where they'll say, well, I want to be this, and I want to be that, and I want to be this. Great organizations have laser focus on what they want to become. And then along the way, you create values. Now, the values are interesting. They're guide rails. Sometimes an organization will violate a value. They'll do something that is inconsistent with who they have been in the past or what they need to do to become successful in the future. We've talked about, you know, an engaging culture, an organization that's vibrant, organizations where people are encouraged to engage and talk and comment, and sometimes we violate those values and we raise our hand and say, whoa, 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 time out. Let's bring ourselves back into and look at our values and assess those values and then have the conversation. So mission, vision, values are very, very significant.
You know, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this whole concept because people feel like the mission statement, the values are a plaque on the wall somewhere that you see in the lobby, and we don't really live those every day. And what we have found in our organizations and the ones we talk to are the ones that actually use values as a way to make decisions are the ones that are the most successful. So the question always is, well, where do you start? And how do you decide what your vision is? What process do you go through? Because there's multiple ways to do that, right? And we're not saying that there's any one way that's most important. What I found over the years is that vision was really composed of three different things. One was purpose, how we make the world a better place. Second was core values, those behaviors that no matter what else changes will never change. And third, the future position, that common vision that says, what's it going to be like 5 or 10 years from now? And it seems like that has to be a process. It's not the CEO or the leader saying this is our vision, but has to be an inclusive process with others in the organization. Can you talk about a little bit about how you've done that in the past?
Yeah, don't you find it interesting though? You join an organization and you go to orientation and there's conversation about the mission, vision, and values, but it's presented by some individual who doesn't really get it or they don't really believe in it. So I think people are perceptive enough and inquisitive enough to ask, what is the mission of this organization? What's the purpose, the meaning, to your point? And sometimes it becomes very obvious that the plaque on the wall is misaligned with the behaviors and the values internally. I remember this one time I was at a budget meeting with it. We were reviewing the annual budget. And there I sat with my chief nursing officer across the table from the division CFO. And on the plaque behind him was the mission statement. Above all else, we are committed to the care and the improvement of human life. In a recognition of this commitment, we strive to provide high quality, cost-effective health care to the communities we serve. It's pretty good. I had that memorized. But as we were discussing the budget, he was berserk about the financials. And he was literally screaming at us, spit coming out of his mouth. You don't get it. You don't get it. This is a business. And trying to cut costs, and what we felt was compromising the mission statement. So the CNO and I would watch his face, and then we would look behind his head at that plaque on the wall. We realized that that was but just a plaque on the wall. And that's an important thing for any new employee or any long-term employee to assess and ask and wonder and consider.
Yeah, and that's why I think it has to be done as a group. So I remember in our company, it was 20 years ago, when we brought a group cross-functionally of 30 or 40 people together in a room to ask ourselves those questions, hash that out. And there were leaders and there were frontline team members, because everybody should have a say in it. And realize that our purpose over time might change as the business changes, but those values are not going to change. And when I say that they're going to impact our day-to-day decisions, examples would be that maybe our employee handbook would say that this is how to deal with a typical situation. But someone would raise their hand and say, but wait a minute, what's the right thing to do here? And one of our values is always do the right thing. And I said, aha, they're living one of the values. Or maybe a customer would ask us to do something that's kind of non-standard or unusual. And someone would raise their hand and say, but wait a minute, are we going to sacrifice quality by taking on that customer? One of our values was never sacrifice quality. And when I saw that people were using those values to make decisions, then you knew that as long as we lived by those values, everything else in the company would be okay. And so they become part of daily conversation. Our recognition programs are tied to them. We tell stories every meeting. We start every big town hall meeting with a description of the values or where people have lived those. So I don't want to underestimate how important these are and the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about today.
Well, and I bet that because you established that foundation during difficult times when hard decisions had to be made, there are business cycles that are up and down, you could return to that conversation and use that dialogue to move the agenda forward. And admittedly, businesses suffer some tremendous challenges in this economy, and tough decisions have to be made. If you can get back to that foundation, it's a powerful tool. And you know, I think organizations that don't invest the time, don't bring the team together to have that conversation, those that fail to invest that time suffer the consequences of that. It's kind of like building your house upon sand. That's building on a rock.
So you have to have that basic foundation. And I think in the next segment, we're going to talk about, now that you have the foundation, where do you go from here? The next segment here, we're going to talk about having fun. Because in any workplace, wherever you work, it's possible to have fun. And you worked in a hospital for years, and some might think, well, how can you have fun in a hospital? But you made it work.
You know, it's really true. It's interesting to watch the impact of allowing people to have fun at work. I probably spend more of my waking hours with my work family than I do my home family, and that's sometimes the case. And there are times when the only relief is a sense of joy and happiness and fun. And so we've done some fun things. I think you're the king of videos, though. I kneel at your greatness on being funny on videos. I don't know if you can tell a little bit about that.
Well, we decided that video would be a great way to communicate with our team members, particularly that we had team members remotely. It's a great way of storytelling nowadays. So one of the things that we would do is at the holidays every year we created a video with me doing something stupid, but doing something that might embarrass me or take me out of my comfort zone. And the message was that in our company we're all in this together. And as the leader, culture isn't something you can delegate. We have to all participate in the culture. And that means we got to let our hair down, and it means dressing up in a matador outfit with roller skates. I'm going to do what I need to do to show that we're all in this together, we're all part of the same family.
I think that's important. When we talk about having fun, we're talking about having fun with purpose and meaning. I recall at the hospital, we were creating service standards. So this was a very large facility. We had 2,500 employees, and any one day, 5,000 to 10,000 people would walk in and out of the doors of that hospital. And over 1 million square feet of office space and hospital space, a lot of moving parts. And what we found is people would enter the facility and feel cold and unwelcome. And we found also that the communications on the phone was horrible. It sounded like a Taco Bell, order out on the phone. So one of my team members had a genius idea. So he took a camera, we took my office desk and a phone and a chair, and we put it in the elevator. And then we videotaped the reaction of employees as they would walk onto the elevator, and there would be the CEO of the hospital on the phone and welcoming them to the elevator. And the video was awesome, but what we were communicating was the importance of communication, using appropriate telephone communication, also welcoming people onto the elevator. And it was funny, it was engaging, it was silly. People even today, this was 10 years ago, still reflect back on that as one of the fun events and activities that communicated our purpose, our meaning, our mission, our vision, and those values.
Again, you're tying it back to the values.
Yeah.
And I think fun is something that you can't just come up with and ask everybody to participate in or expect everybody to participate in. Because if you think about our companies, we all have different kinds of people in different departments that want to do different things. So we used to say, this is what we're going to do, and we realized over time that that's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to ask, what would you like to do to have fun? Fun for one person is different than fun for another. So some might want to go bowling. Some might want to have a bake sale or dress up for Halloween and bring the kids in. Others, it's having a picnic or a movie night. The fact is, we spend so much time at work, and I think this line between work and home and work-life balance doesn't exist anymore.
Well, that's an important point. I think in MBA schools, we're being taught, hey, listen, when they get there at 7, that's when the relationship begins, and when they leave, at the end of the day, that's when the relationship ends. And I think nothing could be more foolish. This becomes your work life and part of your family life as well. So to have fun and engage and participate, I think that's key in the leadership role.
Yeah, it's just life. And the fact is, we strive to include our families, right? You think about our company that we grew for almost 30 years is a call center business. So you think of call centers, you think of the low morale, high attrition, low margin businesses. Well, these are people that were taking calls from people that were upset or angry all day long. The least we could do is try to have a little bit of fun, include their families, bring in family day, carnival rides, invite them to the picnic, because we want to show our appreciation for what they do. And as we're going to see in our next segment, culture is not just about fun. And that's what some people say, well, culture is bagels on Friday morning, or culture is just having fun. It's not what it's about at all. Culture is actually about consistency and institutionalizing things that we do. So it's not an initiative that is short term, it becomes who we are over time. This segment's really to show that culture is as much about caring for the individual in the totality of their lives as anything else we do. Previously, we talked about having fun in the workplace, but the fact is, every one of our employees has a life outside of work. If we can recognize what goes on in that life, if we can know something about their family, if we can recognize those life events that happen, a birth, a death, something good, someone runs the marathon, or their kid graduates from college, we can develop a personal connection with them. And that is something that as our companies get bigger is harder and harder to do. As a CEO, how do you know what's going on in someone's life? So talk about a couple stories, maybe, Britt, where you've been able to do that and put that kind of caring into place.
The great story about a director of environmental services, his name's Bob Bolito. And he has probably the most diverse workforce of anyone in the organization. He has individuals with multiple languages, multiple homes of origin. And regrettably, many of them felt that they were less than. And he decided to recognize the seemingly small accomplishments of members of his team. And it began very small. And he decided, well, we're going to have a small event, and we're going to invite members of the environmental services team to nominate members for accomplishments. And it was a small little certificate, and then it became a little coin or a little medallion. And he realized that this became a very important event in the lives of the team around. Someone had become a U.S. citizen. Someone had graduated from a technical school. They had these awards, and it was on a quarterly basis. All of a sudden, as I mentioned, it took fire. And all of a sudden, they started nominating their children. And then they invited me and a couple of the other suits and ties and administration to come down and make a big deal about it. It was fantastic. I remember one little boy who was the spelling bee champion for his elementary school. And there he came in and had a little suit on. He had a little blue suit on, and he looked so proud of this medallion that he was awarded for being the spelling bee champion of his elementary school. And then it just started snowballing, and the environmental services team expanded that to the dietary department. And then some of the nurses heard about it, and their family members had received awards. I remember around Veterans Day, they had a similar type of event to celebrate family members who were in the service. And nothing could have been more touching than that. And I think that exemplifies the importance of caring. And then they became more unified and felt respected. At that organization, the environmental services team had the highest employee engagement, as surveyed by Press-Ganey, than any department in the United States. And the organization that did the survey had intended to write a chapter on Bob Bolito and his team that engaged and cared and loved their team so much that they were willing to think outside the box.
And think of what that cost for the certificate or the medallion. Nothing. Nothing, just to show people that we cared about them.
And when the ice storm would come and the place was locked down, who were the men and women that would beeline it? They would walk in the ice and the snow to get to the hospital to take care of the rest of the team, thereby creating economic value in a seemingly simple and insignificant event. That was really powerful.
What I found to be the challenge in our company was to scale that, right? So as my company grew to up 400 people, and now as the chief cultural officer of a company with 16,000 people in 13 countries, how would we know what goes on in all these people's lives? So part of it is to train our managers to have the same philosophy, but to put a system in place. So we had a program we called Barrel Cares, for example, and I would get a note because we had an intranet site that any of the managers could go to, and they could type in if there was an event that happened in the lives of one of our employees, and it would automatically send me an email with a photo of that employee and said, here's what the event was. So now I had a trigger to act, and I could go and write a personal note card, and I'm a big fan of handwritten note cards, or I could make a phone call, visit someone in the hospital, go to a funeral, but we didn't miss anyone that way. We made sure we were equal opportunity. And even today in a big global company, we've put systems in place to make sure that we recognize that these events happen. We print special stationery that says Barrel Cares or Steri Cares for Stericycle now. And imagine someone who just gets a note at home from the CEO that says, hey, I understand you recently had some kidney stone issues and just hope you're doing okay, and my best to you and your family. And they're first of all thinking, well, how did you know this? And my God, somebody really cares about me. And so I think we're talking a lot about this as the right thing to do, but I think as we'll see in another segment that it's not just the right thing to do, it's good for business. There are metrics that are going to show us that there's a connection between caring about our people, driving better customer loyalty, and driving better profitability into the business.
I think also understanding the individual is imperative. Knowing the team. There's an exercise that we conduct where we ask the individual, the leader, to list all the members on his or her team and what they know about them. It's fascinating to see those that really understand more than just the day-to-day responsibilities, but the personal lives. Those consistently are more effective leaders. Another observation that I make is sometimes the person is in the wrong seat in the wrong bus, and they are unhappy, they are disenchanted with the responsibility, and the great leaders look at that and understand that. They don't resent it, they don't get frustrated, they recognize that perhaps the individual has tremendous talent and they care for them immeasurably, but they're at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong skill set, and a change needs to occur.
Well, and that's because they care enough to know about that person and can take that into consideration. In our next segment, let's talk about the tough decisions that we have to make sometimes with people in an otherwise very positive culture.
I think another element for conversation, discussion is bringing the right people onto the team. It's imperative. You're building a team that's intended to create exceptional results. Not only do you bring in the right players, and you go through a systematic process by which you do that. But you also evaluate the team and determine who's on that team, who's aligning with that team, who's consistent, who is a benefit to the team, and be willing to make some hard decisions if an individual isn't on the same page.
That's right. First, with hiring, to me, we have to start to hire more for fit and less for skill, right? The fact is, there's people out there that have the skill to do just about any job we have. But how do we screen for fit? And more importantly, when we realize that we've made a bad decision, what do we do about it and when? So I think over time what we've learned is that we have to have true patience when we hire. And unfortunately, we're so anxious when we get the budget to put that next person in that we'll look at a good resume and give them a phone and a computer and say, go at it, instead of taking the time to screen for culture. And that might be done by multiple interviews, by interviewing people kind of in a 360 way. They interview not just with the HR manager, but their boss, people underneath them, peers, putting them in different social situations. It might be doing personality assessments. But I think we really have to take the time to do our best to understand if they're a fit for the organization, as well as having the skill. And if you think of why we fire people, how often do we fire people because of lack of skill? We fire them generally because of lack of fit.
In that fit category, I think it's important to consider that interview process. And you've got to look at that. You've got to look at turnover in that first 60, 90 days, the first year mark. What happened in that process? One of the experiences I've had has been behavioral questions, scenarios. Yeah. It's just basically, that's what it is. You throw a scenario out and you ask for the individual who does not have a canned answer for that. I mean, when you interview someone, there's always, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. I think you can get past that pretty quick. But if you can throw into the conversation, the discussion, a behaviorally formatted question. What would you do in this scenario? And then follow-up questions. You get an idea of how their brain functions, how they think. And then I think that's really a great point. Bringing other members of the team into the conversation. Then they're vested in the success of that individual. And if it doesn't work out, they ask themselves, what did we miss and what can we watch for into the future? Yeah,
what we did is we kind of divided and conquered around interviewing. Because if you have 7 people interview, you don't want to have them all asking the same questions. Oh, let's review your resume. So we had people that were focused on the skill, some people that were focused on behavioral-based questions, other people just focused on fit. Mm-hmm. Or did I like this person? And then you get together and talk about it. But I think you'd have to admit that you and I have made mistakes over the years where we simply wait too long, realizing that ultimately this person's not a fit for the organization, and to get the courage to do something about it. And in one of our books, we have a chapter called Whiners, Losers, and Jerks. And you look, they're in every organization. But we procrastinate, and we don't make the tough decision, and everyone else is looking at us and waiting for us to act. How can we have better control over that process? Well, let's put an exclamation point on this. No whiners, no losers, no jerks. Let me be emphatic on that point, because organizations have a culture, and when you have an individual who misaligns, it can destroy a team. And as you mentioned, everyone's watching you as the leader on how you deal with that disruptive element in the organization. I recall an individual, and she was over customer service, and she just didn't have it. She didn't want to have it, and it was fascinating for me to watch. It was a simple task. Walk into a patient's room, inquire about how they're doing, identify opportunities for improvement, make them feel warm and comfortable, and monitor that, send out reports. She could not do it, and she was in the wrong place. It was the wrong fit. And I struggled with it, and everyone was watching how I handled that. And it wasn't until we had a very, very personal and intimate conversation about what her hopes and aspirations were and what some of her challenges were, that it was clear that that was the wrong place for her. We hired her as the director of volunteers, and she became a superstar. The skill set that was needed in the volunteers aligned with her personal skill sets, and we missed it. And moving her over opened up opportunities for others, and then communicated to the organization as a whole. If you don't get it, we're going to look where you can fit, and if you can't fit in any of these places, well, there'll be time for you to move on. But
I think that was an important life message.
Well, that's a real success story. And we're not always that lucky where we can move a person into another role. Sometimes it's simply not a fit and we need to act. And I remember years ago we had a call center manager and she oversaw probably 200 people. And it took us a year to figure out the impact that she was having on the organization. I remember interviewing her. She came from a big public company, had a great resume, had really good ideas. But she came in like a bull in a china store, making change without talking to other people. They might have been very good ideas, but she wasn't inclusive at all. When we finally realized it and I let her go, I remember a call center agent coming up to my office with tears in her eyes and saying, Paul, you just lifted a cloud from the organization. Now, did I feel good that I lifted a cloud? No, I felt terrible. What took me so long? Why didn't I have an early warning system in place to make sure that I knew the impact that this person was having? So we have to listen to our gut, and we have to have the courage to make tough decisions. And I'm willing to stand up at a town hall and say to everybody, hey, we're on a mission to make the world a better place. And if you're going to be a negative influencer, if you're going to bring everybody else down, we're going to seek you and find you, and we're going to make you uncomfortable. Hopefully you're going to self-select out, and if not, we're going to make that decision. And I think in most organizations, if we're honest with ourselves, there's people in the organization that don't belong. And we cannot accomplish what we want as a business, let alone build a great culture, until we have the right people in the right seats at the right time.
And I think it's incumbent upon every person within that organization to continue to step up their game. I sometimes grieve for an individual that's in a position, that's been in the position for 20 years, has done it the same way for 20 years, and believes that that's the way they'll do it for the next, till they retire. And guess what? The world is not flat. It continues to change. And I think you do no service to the individual or the organization by not having the conversation, to challenging the individual, engaging in the discussion, and then purposefully making hard decisions that align with, back to the mission, the vision, and the values.
Well, I think in our last segment, I'd like to talk about how you can transfer the mission, vision, and values to the individual and talk about their true purpose, which is really why we exist as a company. So now, to close, Britt, I want to talk about the fact that while all of our companies provide a service, we're here to make money, generate profit for all of our stakeholders, I do believe our companies exist to enhance the lives of the people that work here. And we don't do that just by simply aligning them to the company mission, vision, and values. Each of us personally has our own mission, vision, and values. How do we investigate what that is for our people and align that with what goes on in the company?
I think that's a very tough conversation for those that aren't accustomed to that kind of approach. Most organizations, to be honest, really don't care about the members on the team. And that's why we have a lot of bad bosses out there and horrible organizations. There are great movies and TV shows about that. But those exceptional organizations have that conversation, and they challenge the individual. And they ask very purposeful questions. I'm always inspired of the conversations you've had with your team members. And we can use the word loyalty. I think the word trust. They trust you to have an honest conversation with them, and they know that you care about them. And then you force them to ask themselves personal questions. Why am I here? Where am I going? What are the values that I personally will live by? There's some individuals who their professional life experience is but one of many steps in life. And they can enhance the organization during the period of time that they're part of the organization, but they'll move on, and you celebrate that. I always worry about an organization that penalizes individuals who continue to grow. I think great organizations celebrate, and sometimes that means moving on to other opportunities, and that's wonderful, because then it messages to everyone else on the team that this is a growing organization. They will then invest, give it their all, and the organization will be very successful. The data is out there. Best places to work have successful and superior financial performance because they invest in the individual.
That's right. I think the same exercise that we go through with company vision is to be used personally. So, for example, we had an exercise with our management team where I said to them, I want you to write down your purpose, how you make the world a better place, and just a phrase. I want you to write down your core values, and then put yourself 5 years from now and talk about what your future looks like. and be very honest about that, all on one piece of paper. And then I would go around the room and ask them those questions, and they'd go through those, and you'd listen to how open and transparent people were. And I remember my HR leader saying that he really wanted to be a landscape architect. And at first I was thinking, well, I never knew anything about that. Now, was I threatened that he was going to leave us? No. But now when I had my one-to-one meetings with him, I could talk to him about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Do I think he's going to work harder and be loyal to us while he's here? Of course. And if he leaves, and I can feel like I've had an impact on his life and his career, I'm going to feel good about that. So it's actually quite fascinating to hear the stories of what people really want to do, and whether they're looking for a career for life with your company or it's a stepping stone to something else. And what you'll find is that the core values are often quite aligned with what the core values are of the business. And that's what makes it's special for people to work together, to know about each other, and really work as a team moving forward.
I'd actually take it one step further. I think individuals have to find meaning and purpose in life. Men and women of faith look to that as their foundation. And that is a very powerful and motivating source for many. For me, in my professional life, I kept on asking, what did God want me to do? And when the challenges would emerge, I would look at that as an opportunity of service. And I think very few successful organizations or individuals don't do that. I think organizations that are very successful are able to capture that and inspire and motivate. The other thought that I have along those lines of finding a purpose and a meaning behind what you do is, I fear that we might have let that process and that discipline erode. And so I'd be interested to see, what the reaction would be from the audience, from your team, when you start asking the question, what's your purpose in life? What do you hope to achieve? What are your goals? Where do you want to be in 3 years and 5 years? And to actually write those down. Stephen Covey has done a magnificent job, made a tremendous amount by asking those very purposeful questions, like starting with the end in mind, etc.
Yeah, I think that's something that nowadays, especially with our millennials and younger folks, they're not afraid to answer that question. And they want something more. They want something more than a job, they more to make money. They want to make the world a better place. They want to improve society, and I love that. The fact that they're fickle about where they work, I don't think we should be threatened by that. I think that raises the bar for us to create a feeling of loyalty and a reason why they want to be here, because we're helping them achieve their purpose. So this has been great, Britt. If you wanted to say one final thing to our viewers, what would it be?
Well, I think it gets back to some of my earlier comments. Find a purpose and meaning in the work that you do. Find an organization that aligns with those values and that meaning and that purpose, and then just unleash the potential.
And I would say that if you are growing a company, that leading by values is the most important thing that you can do. If you are looking for a company or looking for a new career, be patient and take time to realize that there are companies like the ones that Britt and I have described that do the right thing, that treat people well, that care about their people, and build wonderful companies and wonderful futures. And we all realize that life is short. We have to be able to achieve our purpose and be happy in our lives. So thank you for having us.